It was a morning that seemed peaceful in Washington, until a single phone call sent shockwaves through the political sphere and the business world alike. President Donald Trump, in his signature firm and commanding tone, directly confronted Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. According to a report from CNN, Trump was furious after Amazon leaked plans to publicly display price increases tied to tariffs on each individual product. That moment marked the eruption of growing tensions between the White House and the e-commerce giant into an all-out public confrontation. Behind the sharp words and political firestorm, a silent storm was brewing, slow, relentless, and threatening to dismantle the very foundation of globalization that had taken decades to build. Just hours later, the White House announced one of the most shocking economic decisions in U.S. history: a 10% tariff on all imported goods, and a staggering 145% on products coming from China. This was no longer a policy adjustment. It was a direct blow to the global trade system, severing the delicate threads that connected economies across the world. It was a strike that rocked corporations, factories, ports, and American households alike. And in the eye of that storm stood Amazon, the company that commands 40% of the U.S. e-commerce market, now thrust into the epicenter of chaos. People began to ask, could Amazon survive and adapt? Could a tech empire of such scale pivot its fate in the blink of an eye when millions of orders, billions of products, and hundreds of thousands of suppliers were suddenly caught in a labyrinth of tariffs? This was no longer about profits or stock prices. It was a matter of survival, adapt or collapse. And soon enough, the shock from Washington triggered the first aftershocks. Prices for electronics, clothing, and household goods surged across the board in just a matter of weeks. At the bustling ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, the usual stream of containers began to thin out. American consumers, long accustomed to convenience and low prices, started to feel the harsh shift in every shopping cart. The global supply chain, a machine that had run smoothly for decades, began to creak and crack, sounding the alarm of a crisis spreading fast. Just days after the announcement from Washington, the American public began to feel the shift, viscerally and unmistakably. Smartphones that once fell comfortably into the mid-range price bracket suddenly felt like luxury items. A simple outfit, essential household goods, even a roll of toilet paper at the supermarket, everything had unexpectedly surged in price. The shock spread like a tidal wave, crashing through stores, warehouses, and every online shopping cart. Consumers who had grown used to the buy now, fast delivery, low price lifestyle were now staring down a harsh new reality. Their carts felt heavier, not from the goods themselves, but from the numbers on the screen. For Amazon, it was a puzzle with no easy solution. Keeping prices steady to please customers would mean swallowing billions of dollars in losses each quarter. But raising prices? That risked alienating a customer base known for its price sensitivity, people who could just as easily look elsewhere or give up shopping altogether. Suddenly, every marketing strategy, every sophisticated AI system designed to forecast demand seemed powerless in the face of one invisible force: tariffs. For many observers, the 2018 trade war, which saw the U.S. slap a 25% tariff on Chinese goods, had already left its mark. But compared to the 145% blow dealt in 2025, that earlier skirmish felt like a light breeze next to a Category 10 hurricane. This time, there was no pain threshold for corporations to maneuver around, just an immovable wall. Containers sat motionless at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, with cargo volume dropping by as much as 20%. Freight companies, truck drivers, warehouse workers, they lost hours, paychecks, even jobs. And tragically, the communities around the ports, from mom-and-pop diners to local convenience stores, dependent on the constant flow of goods and people, quickly found themselves on the brink. This domino effect didn't just paralyze the supply chain, it exposed a brutal truth. The globalization model that had brought prosperity to millions was now more fragile than ever. A single stroke of a pen from the White House could turn major international trade routes into dead ends. Entire local economies could become deserts overnight, and Amazon, no matter how massive, was not immune to the storm. And yet, instead of collapsing, Amazon chose to confront the crisis head-on. Within weeks, company leadership announced a sweeping $13 billion restructuring plan, a transformation effort of unprecedented scale, akin to dissecting and rebuilding the very body of the corporate giant. The only question was, where would they find new lifeblood? China, the biggest hub, was now closed off, and so new trade maps slowly began to unfold, with names like Mexico, India, and Vietnam emerging as rising stars in the constellation of the global supply chain. In the moment long-standing contracts with China were torn up, Amazon was forced to do something it had never imagined: pivot its entire supply map. From massive hubs in Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, the e-commerce giant now had to turn its gaze toward new horizons. This wasn't just a geographical shift. It was a historic commercial migration, where every factory, every production line, and every shipping contract had to be transplanted into a new world. Mexico became the first destination. With its proximity to the US border, low transportation costs, and newly favorable trade agreements, the country was quickly seen by Amazon as a gateway alternative to goods that once crossed the Pacific. Industrial zones in Monterrey, Guadalajara, and Tijuana lit up through the night as thousands of newly hired workers stepped into assembly lines. Along the highways that stretched the border, Amazon trucks began forming convoys, replacing the familiar sight of container ships docking in California. But Amazon didn't stop there. In India, a country with a vast labor force and an exploding consumer market, the company found a two-in-one hub for both production and consumption. India's logistics infrastructure, heavily invested in over recent years, now became the backbone of new supply chains. Goods from the industrial corridors of Bangalore, Chennai, and Pune quickly merged into the flow of global commerce, partially filling the void left by China's absence. And then Vietnam emerged as the world's new factory floor. Explosive growth in electronics, textiles, and household goods had already reached double-digit levels, and Amazon wasted no time seizing the moment. Haiphong, Bac Ninh, and Bin Duong, once seen as supporting players, stepped into the spotlight, becoming key links in the global value chain. Factories sprang up at lightning speed. Orders rolled in one after another, transforming Vietnam into one of Amazon's strategic pillars in the wake of the tariff shock. From Mexico to India, from Vietnam to the new ocean routes, Amazon wasn't just relocating its manufacturing. It was redrawing the entire map of global trade. Every move was like a calculated piece in a geopolitical chess match, where jobs, influence, and national power intersected. And as the giant found new harbors, a pressing question echoed louder than ever: who would benefit, and who would bear the cost of this unprecedented shift? The answer lay in the brutal contrast between collapsing economies and those rising into the light, a vivid portrait of winners and losers in a world being reshaped before our eyes. In America, cold, impersonal statistics slowly turned into the lived reality of everyday families. Consumers, once accustomed to convenience and reasonable prices, now faced bills that had risen by 10 to 20% for daily essentials. From a coffee maker to a pair of sneakers, everything became more expensive. Retail giants like Walmart, Target, and Home Depot, once seen as nearly invincible, collectively sounded the alarm over plummeting sales. And behind those numbers were the millions of dock workers, truck drivers, and warehouse staff, the backbone of the American supply chain, watching their hours get cut, their income shrink, or their jobs disappear entirely. Along America's West Coast, the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, once symbols of a thriving rhythm, had grown eerily quiet. Restaurants that once bustled with workers now sat nearly empty. The neighborhoods around the ports no longer echoed with the roar of container trucks, but instead were filled with an unsettling silence. It was a stark contrast to the industrial zones on the other side of the Pacific, or just south of the border in Mexico. In Haiphong, Bin Duong, and Bac Ninh, factory lights stayed on through the night. Thousands of new workers were hired, and residential areas sprang up to accommodate the flood of labor pouring in. In Tijuana and Monterrey, Mexico, highways buzzed with lines of Amazon trucks, hauling goods bound for the U.S. In Bangalore and Chennai, India, newly built assembly lines roared to life, working with urgency as if racing against time. New jobs, new incomes, and new opportunities arose daily, transforming nations once on the sidelines into direct beneficiaries of the trade upheaval. This was the paradox of reversed globalization. While America raised walls of protectionism in the name of saving jobs, those very walls became gateways of opportunity for others. On one side, stagnation, even collapse. On the other, booming growth. And that contrast extended far beyond economics, slowly revealing a deeper, more profound shift. Because in a world where trade and power are inseparable, this realignment would inevitably carry geopolitical consequences. And that, more than any shipment, tariff, or corporate decision, marks the next chapter of the story. The geopolitics of the new trade order, where the global chessboard of power is being rearranged in real time. What unfolded after the tariff shock went far beyond import numbers or soaring prices. It redrew the entire map of global economic power. China, once hailed as the world's factory and the dominant force in the US market, was suddenly cast out of the game. But Beijing didn't sit idle. It swiftly pivoted toward Asia and Europe, signing new contracts and expanding its markets in the Middle East and Africa. The flow of Chinese goods continued. It just no longer prioritized the United States. Once again, the world was witnessing a seismic shift in the center of trade gravity. Meanwhile, Amazon emerged as a key architect of this new order. By elevating Vietnam, India, and Mexico into central roles, the company effectively sponsored the rise of nations eager to break through. Mexico, now with added leverage under the new NAFTA, became an indispensable gateway for goods flowing into the US. Vietnam, with its agile manufacturing and explosive growth, was increasingly seen as China's successor on the factory floor. And India, bolstered by its massive population and rising political clout, stepped into global negotiations with more power than ever before. Ironically, the protectionist policies meant to reinforce America's dominance ended up eroding its role in global trade. As maritime shipping lanes lost significance, replaced by endless truck routes from Mexico into the US, or direct air routes from Asia to Europe, American ports were no longer the indispensable hubs they once were. In its attempt to take back control, Washington inadvertently let go of the very arteries that pumped life into its economic power. Trade has never been just about money. It's long been a soft weapon in the arena of international relations. Now, with Amazon's supply chain sprawling across the globe, the company began to act almost like a nation unto itself, signing deals, allocating resources, even shaping the fate of millions of workers. This was the moment when corporate power began to challenge government authority, and national borders blurred under the force of technology and capital. And yet, to maintain that upper hand, Amazon needed more than new factories or long-term contracts. What it needed most was adaptability built into the core of its operations. Behind the familiar shopping interface, behind every simple click, was a colossal engine of artificial intelligence, algorithms, and data, all of which now had to be reprogrammed from the ground up. And it is there, inside Amazon's own digital machinery, that the real battleground lies, where the company must prove it has what it takes to survive in this age of chaos. Few could imagine that behind those seemingly simple clicks on Amazon's website lies a colossal technological engine straining to adapt and transform. When factories in China were removed from the supply map, Amazon's entire algorithmic system, from demand forecasting and shipping cost analysis to inventory management, had to be reprogrammed on the fly. In the past, it only took data from Shenzhen or Guangzhou for the system to accurately calculate delivery times down to the zip code across the US. But now, that data had to change. No more containers crossing the Pacific, but instead trucks rolling up from Monterey, freight trains leaving Haiphong, or airplanes flying in components from Bangalore. This wasn't just a minor adjustment. Amazon's entire AI infrastructure, trained on billions of transactions and millions of transport routes, had to start learning all over again. The system had to account for daily fluctuations in Mexican truck fuel prices, for occasional port congestion in Vietnam, or for monsoon weather in India that could delay dozens of cargo flights. Each new variable was a complex equation, and Amazon was forced to pour billions of dollars into accelerating its retraining, so that the AI could not only predict with accuracy, but do so twice as fast as before. From the outside, consumers merely noticed that prices were up and packages were a few days late. What they didn't see was the unprecedented technological race happening inside Amazon. Engineers worked around the clock to rewrite algorithms, upgrade data centers, and rebuild the entire smart map of the global supply chain. Hundreds of thousands of lines of new code were written just to ensure that a blender from Vietnam could arrive on time in Texas, or that a laptop assembled in India could reach New Jersey without doubling in cost. That is Amazon's true power, its ability to pivot at a colossal scale. No other company could reconfigure $13 billion worth of contracts in mere weeks, while simultaneously overhauling one of the most complex tech systems on the planet. What seemed like a potentially fatal blow became a trial by fire, one that revealed the company's inner strength. A strength that didn't just reside in towering warehouses or automated assembly lines, but in relentless streams of data and tireless artificial intelligence. And as Amazon proved it could not only survive, but emerge stronger from the crisis, one final question remains. What lesson does this hold for the new era, one where globalization is unraveling and the future of global trade remains uncertain? Looking back at the events of 2025, we're faced with a bitter paradox. The massive tariffs Washington had hoped would bring jobs back to America ended up pushing them even farther away, to Mexico, Vietnam, and India. These countries not only welcomed waves of investment and new production lines, but also climbed higher on the global value chain. Meanwhile, the US, despite being the epicenter of the trade war, watched its role as the gateway of global commerce slowly fade. Once bustling seaports fell quiet, while endless convoys of trucks rolled across highways near the Mexican border, delivering goods into the US, a vivid symbol of this historic shift. Amazon, the central figure in this entire storm, did not fall. In fact, after months of chaos, it rose stronger than ever, becoming living proof that in an age of hyper-connectivity, tech giants are no longer just companies. They are invisible nations, wielding the power to reshape the world. But the biggest lesson isn't Amazon's success. It's the price America paid. In a world so complex and interconnected, no nation can build walls of protection without also hurting itself. This is a reminder to us all. Globalization, though challenged, remains an unstoppable current. And the future of trade doesn't rest solely in the hands of governments. It now lies with massive entities like Amazon, technological machines rewriting the rules of the 21st century. But what about you? What do you think about this tariff pandemic? Was it a misstep by Washington or a necessary stress test for a world in need of a new trade order? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the global chessboard, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a future video.